All righty, let's kick it off. This is the Spin Project meeting, weekly Spin Project meeting. Today is Monday, October 7th. It is the earlier meeting scheduled, which is 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Please convert to your respective time zones. And we're going to kick off our meeting today with a demo. Karthik is going to talk to us about the component dependencies experience, and he has been hacking away on a little plugin for us. So we'll do that, and then we will revisit the project board. And if you have any additional agenda items, please feel free to throw them on the agenda for today. If someone could take notes, that would be really helpful. Otherwise, this link will be posted, or the link to this recording will be posted on YouTube later. Karthik, feel free to take it away.
Just oh, I need screen sharing enabled. It's disabled.
There you go.
Spin in the current Canary has a feature called component dependencies, which allows satisfying the imports of one component via another component. And so there's a plugin called Spin Depths that I've been hacking on, which allows you to add other components from registries or your local sources or even HTTP sources, and then generate bindings for the said component so that they can be consumed different component. So the first component I've built is a Markdown, a simple component with a WIT file that looks like that has an interface called Markdown tools, and it exports only one function called Markdown function or a render function, which takes in a string, renders the Markdown, and returns the output HTML string. So I've built this component and I pushed it to a registry, and then now I want to consume it. So I have a second app, which all it does is it takes in uh, the component wants to use the Markdown renderer function. So the first thing we'd want to do is add, uh, let me step back again. So it's a HTTP component and you want to use a Markdown renderer that's already been written and pushed to the registry. So how do we do it? So the first step we'd want to do is we'd want to add the pushed component from the registry. So spin deps add, and this is my own registry. So that's why I'm overriding the default registry and the name of the component. So it's going to pull down the component and then walk you through which component do you want to add the dependency to, and like what do you want to import from the said component. And then if I say markdown functions, it's going to go edit spin.toml for us, and it's going to say this component, the example component has a dependency on the markdown renderer and the version of the component and what it exports. So once that is done, we can generate bindings for it. So there is another command called spin depths generate bindings. And it'll help. So we can specify the language. It currently only supports Rust, although it says TS here, but it supports only TypeScript and the output folder and what component you want to generate it for. So let's do language Rust, output to source, slash bindings, and then component ID as example. So it has generated bindings and bindings, which I already had. So it's going to and generate bindings using with bindgen for Rust, and then it allows you to just if you hover over, like it just lets you import the function pretty much from the different component where we are just using the bindings generator, and all it does is renders hello world. So you can in build. And when you request, it just converts the string into paragraphs, which is the markdown representation for it. That's how you can add a dependency from end to end. Like you can add it to your manifest and generate bindings for it, and use it in your application. That's all I had for the demo.
That's awesome, Karthik. Thanks so much. And for the folks who haven't tried out component dependencies yet, this is a really exciting new feature coming up in Spin 3.0, which is slated for release later this month. We'll be releasing the first RC in just a few weeks in case you want to try it out. It's also merged into main. And so these are things that you can try out. Now, Karthik, is your Depths plugin public?
Yes, you can install a canary of it. Uh, it's on the Fermion.org. I can paste the link in that
Oh,
if I can find where it is.
awesome.
I can paste it in a moment.
Sounds good. Thank you. So, why this is so exciting is that, first we're like, oh my gosh, WASM, it's like smaller. And like, then we're like, oh my gosh, it's also, well, first we were like, it's safer. And now, it's also smaller. So it's really great for serverless stuff. But with dependencies, what we're getting into is that polyglot developer experience and making that easier in Spin, which is really exciting. And that's great, but it's still, early days for this stuff. So there's a lot of steps involved, like figuring out what imports you want to target using downloading the component from a specific registry. A lot of good work being done in the Bytecode Alliance SIG packaging around that, previously known as SIG registry. And Karthik, what you've showed us here today is how you've taken a bunch of steps that are really hard, which is like dealing with the registry and figuring out the imports and generating the bindings and then using your bindings. That's all condensed in this plugin experience, which is really exciting. So thanks so much for showing that off. And we hope everyone takes a look at that and tries it out and gives us feedback, especially in the next few weeks, since we are slated to cut a 3.0. So if you find any bumps or, it doesn't work for your specific use case, then like, please let us know. But, it's something that we've been really excited and passionate about for the last few months here. Okay. And any questions for Karthik before we move on? Cool. Okay, so the next thing that I have on the agenda is revisiting the project board. And I will just share my screen real quick for that. Okay, oh, never mind. Can y'all see my screen? A verbal something would be great. Oh, cool. Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
There you are. Okay, cool. So, we are again in the midst of planning and executing for 3.0. We have a few new items to discuss. We did some triaging last week, so there are some must-haves. If anybody wants to pick those up, those are available. There's a few nice-to-haves as well. So if anybody's interested, you can pick that up. And I think we have a few issues in progress. So we'll just go ahead and triage the new column. Kate, this is your issue. If you're around, could you speak to what's going on here and what we should be thinking about?
Sure, yeah. So WASI config is going to have a vote to move to phase three soon. And they need more, I think it's WASI, no, less so WASI config, but it also would be good for it to have more implementations to support it moving to phase three. So and for us to start moving towards WASI interfaces when possible. WASI config is basically has the same objective, or it does have the same objective as our variables interface. And so this was just an issue to track us moving to that, and 3.0 being a good time period for that. Ivan put up a PR to implement supporting WASI config. It brought up some questions that we wanted to surface to the WASI config design. And so we had created an issue in WASI config about the error types that it is limiting you to. Um, I think that's the only thing that's holding it in draft mode. Um, other than that, like the implementation is probably in good shape and people have been reviewing it. So I think if we decide that we don't need the error types to be extended in WASI config, we could probably get this in very soon. If we do feel like we want the error types extended, we're getting a little bit of pushback. So we just need to push a little harder back if that we feel like that is um, a requirement for us.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody have thoughts on the error stuff right now? Okay, I think this is a nice to have for 3.0. Would you agree, Kate? Or do you think that this is a must have?
I think it would be a good must have, but just because I think we can do it, I think we have the momentum there, and there's not really a reason not to get it in. But I think if we're going to go by definition of what we have to have, maybe it isn't. But um, so I'd be curious if other people have thoughts on that too. I think it could be a must have just because WASI config is having that vote soon and having more implementations is helpful to that interface. And as stewards of, of WASI, we should probably look to support it.
Yeah, that sounds good. And is there any reason we can't add it after 3.0? I'm just curious about if it needs to be part of a major version change.
No, it doesn't because
Oh,
it's additive. You could still use the variables interface.
okay, sounds good. Any other thoughts on must have or nice to have from anybody else?
Just clarifying for my understanding, there's no breaking changes either with introducing it, right, Kate?
No, there aren't. We might phase out the variables interface over time, but that's a future discussion.
Okay, sounds good. And that would be a breaking change, and we would definitely need to discuss that further. Um, okay, and so Kate, you want it as a must-have or a nice to have?
I would like to get it in, but if we're going by definition of like, is it a breaking change and all of that, I guess it's not a must have. So we could put it in nice to have and just motivate ourselves.
Sounds good. I'll put it at the top of the queue. Okay, sounds good. And do we want to talk about the WASI key value spec work happening? Anybody have any contacts on that?
I can also give an update here. Similarly, Waziki value, there's going to be a vote to move it to phase three soon. I think this week or next week. Um, or yeah, I think their goal is to do it soon. It needs another implementation though. Spin is a good option for that. This is not as simple of an update. So WASI key value, our current key value store does get, set, delete, um, simple store operations. WASI key value has two extra interfaces it supports, atomic operations like compare and swaps, and batch operations like get all, set all, etc. So moving to WASI key value requires us to implement support of a wider range of functions. Um, Ivan has put up a PR of moving us our store simple operations of get, set, delete, etc. to WASI key values interface. And David Justice has volunteered, um, and maybe we should assign him to the issue. I don't know. And Ivan, if we can assign multiple people. Um, to implement the new set of interfaces. And he wants to get this in before KubeCon at WASI 3.0. So I believe he's aware of the deadline, but it might be worth bumping him if that's something that we want to get in.
Okay, gotcha. Caleb, go for it.
Um, kind of speaking for Ivan here, one of the key blockers he's pointed out for this, I think, is a little bit of confusion about whether we're adding this directly to the spin world or a different world. He's alluded to that on my WASI Observe PRs of we kind of have this open question of how we want to do that with these new interfaces. So I just want to raise that because I think there's some design work that needs to be done around that. And that might be a blocker, making it hard to land this in time.
Okay, gotcha.
Caleb, just to clarify there, is that basically like these are WASI interfaces, not spin interfaces, so why are we adding them to the spin world?
Um, Maybe kind of. I think it's more with, for example, with WASI Observe, it's at a state where the spec maybe isn't stable and standardized. So we're unsure if we want to stick it in the same world or if we want to put it into an experimental world where the user has to explicitly opt into it. And so Ivan's drawed a parallel there to WASI key value. I guess maybe my one confusion would be it seems like WASI key value is more stable. So we're probably okay putting that in the main world and not having to have the user flip a toggle to get access to it. But I just know that's a concern Ivan's had, so I wanted to raise it as something that might be blocking.
What is that a PR? Is that conversation happening in a pull request or an issue?
I can try and hunt down the like random comment he left on my WASI Observe PR that kind of mentioned this being the same issue for key value, and I'll link it.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else have any thoughts around that? I don't have any thoughts just yet off the top of my head.
Uh, I, just as a small like +1 to what Caleb was saying, that I think we don't really have a great kind of policy for introducing new interfaces into the spin world. And so every time that we have a conversation about a new interface or set of interfaces, we sort of have to have this discussion again from first principles. And so it might be helpful at some point for us to kind of rationalize this in the abstract, so to decide when are we okay with adding interfaces, what does it mean to add something to the spin world, what kind of guarantees does that come with, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that makes sense when we do keep continuously bumping into the same issue over and over again. I agree. So maybe there should be a meta issue around this so that we can have that process discussion. We can maybe create a new issue and then put it on the board and kind of come back to it next week.
That sounds good. And just to make explicit, I guess, more of the conversations I've had around this, I've talked with Till about this before, and he's talked about how Alex has experience with this kind of stuff in WASM time,
Yeah.
and how he would maybe try and get Alex to write a SIP. But I think it'd be really good to just have a meta issue, like you said, so we can all talk about this in one place and figure out what we're going to do.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. All right. Let's make that our big theme for next week. Hash it out, get our thoughts out so we can just deal with it once and for all. All right. And I'm gonna leave this issue in new. I'm not actually super clear on if this is a nice to have or a must have. And part of that ambiguity for me is stemming from not really having a great idea of the greater world conversation that Caleb just brought up. So if anybody has any other thoughts around whether this should be a nice to have or a must have, feel free to speak up. But I think for me, I'm going to need to like get a little more context and try to figure out what's going on here. And I know that David Justice, and I think Kate mentioned this earlier, is really trying to get this in before 3.0. So I'm on the fence here. Any other
I
thoughts?
think one thing we can say is that WASI key value and WASI config are like a part of a similar objective. And so I think if we put WASI config is nice to have, key value probably lives there too. And if we move, or if the world's discussion is blocking one, it would block the other.
Okay, I can buy that. I'll move this into, uh, let me confirm with David Justice and then I'll move it into nice to haves. But I agree with you on the general stance here.
Sounds good.
All right, that's the project board. Caleb?
I just had one more item. I left the comment earlier. Pull request 2857 would be a must-have for landing spin 3.0. It's like fingers crossed, like hours away from merging, but there's some broken telemetry stuff that needs to land before we should cut 3.0.
Sounds good. And this is in progress, so I'll just throw that on there so we can make sure we have that tracked. All right, any other things that folks want to call out as new items or things that we should discuss on the 3.0 front? Okay, and any other items that we want to discuss that are non 3.0 related? Okay. All right, there are issues on the board. Feel free to tackle them. I don't have anything else. If anybody has anything else, please share. Otherwise, we can get out 4 minutes early.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye, everyone.